Sweden, NASCIO Program Director for Enterprise Architecture and Governance. We welcome you to this webinar on cross-jurisdictional collaboration, lessons from current practice. This webinar is sponsored by the NASCIO Enterprise Architecture and Governance Committee. We are very pleased to have the following panelists with us to share their experiences. We have Phil Bertolini, who is CIO, Deputy County Executive for Oakland County, Michigan. He has been in that position since January of 2005. Phil is a vocal advocate for cloud and enterprise solutions in government, cross-boundary resource sharing, and interjurisdictional cooperation. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Linda Pung is General Manager in the Michigan Department of Technology, Management and Budget. She is responsible for customer partnership and delivery of IT services for the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Linda has more than 10 years of experience in developing IT strategies and implementing innovative solutions to achieve business goals. Thanks for being here, Linda.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Welcome, everyone.
Stu Davis is State Chief Information Officer and Assistant Director for the Ohio Department of Administration Services, Office of Information Technology. Stu has a varied background in IT leadership and management, including infrastructure, enterprise shared services, and spatial technologies. Stu is also a past president of NASCIO. Great to have you on this webinar, Stu.
Great to be here.
Our facilitator is Dr. Jerry Meckling, formerly on the faculty at Harvard and most recently retired from his position as Vice President, Gartner Research. Jerry's also a fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration and a former fellow of the John F. Kennedy Institute of Politics. His career has focused on helping institutional leaders adapt to the challenges of the information age, including cross-jurisdictional collaboration. Thanks for joining us today, Jerry.
Delighted to be here.
Here's our agenda. Dr. Meckling will bring us through a development of an analytics framework he created for evaluating and understanding cross-jurisdictional collaboration. We'll visit with each of our panelists regarding some of their cutting-edge success stories, and then we'll do a Q&A, question and answer, and then close with some conclusions. Everyone on this webinar will be muted to avoid background noise, but please send your questions through the chat and direct it to everyone so everyone can see your questions, and we'll address as many of those as we can. We want to make you aware as well that cross-jurisdictional collaboration has been a priority for NASCIO for some time. It presents on our strategic plan, as you can see here. And we have, in support of that agenda, we've had a website dedicated to cross-jurisdictional collaboration that presents a library of success stories from our state members and several reports that we wrote based on those success stories. We also have a category within our NASCIO IT Recognition Awards, and this provides us with a library of ideas for joining up and achieving great results. We've addressed cross-jurisdictional issues in our annual CIO surveys. In 2016, we asked the question of our state CIOs, what services are you offering to local governments? And here are the results. Again, you'll have these slides, so you don't have to try to grab these with a screen print or anything. We will provide the deck to you, but you can see some of the top services include data center hosting, co-location email, and with that, I want to thank you all for joining, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Meckling.
Thanks very much, Eric, and thanks to everybody for filling out the survey questions at the beginning. The most interesting one to me was the one that said that 60% of you say that for your jurisdiction, this cross-jurisdictional stuff is a important issue, a front burner issue, one that is getting a serious amount of attention. I think that makes this group a different than the average group because as somebody who's done a lot of research on governmental work with information technology and was a budget director for the city of Boston and did budget work in the federal government and for New York City, the idea that's most dominant is get done the work that's on your plate, the things that you've been directly assigned to do, the things that are in your jurisdiction. And the idea of looking outside to work with somebody else for something that may or may not be expected tends to be rare. What we're exploring right now is a possibility that that which is rare for the world but pretty high priority for you guys should be of increasing priority for everybody. And we now want to sort of think through how would each agency, each jurisdiction try to think through that problem on their own. And the fundamental idea is that we should do it if we've learned that it works. And the analytic framework that we're going to explore is not really my framework. It's the one everybody's used for almost every kind of problem for many, many, many years. And we'll call it the learning loop. Basically, what we're trying to do is to take good actions in government that, with any luck at all, or with good skill, will lead to results, but not just results, results we care a lot about. And to improve those results, what we have to do is not just the action loop or the action value chain that we see here, but the feedback. What results have there actually been? Can we analyze those results to make future decisions of a similar sort that will improve our action and improve our results? You know, fundamentally, the framework is to observe, analyze, decide, and then act. And what's very important to understand for all kinds of activities is that the vast majority of the resources the government invests to do things go in the action chain, 95% or more. So all the money that governments spend on information technology, the staff to run it, the information that's collected and how it's disseminated, that work is very important, but is only about 5% of the total resources. What we're trying to do, though, is to say, will the evidence collected from that information help us improve results? And certainly in the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years with digital information, we've had a different kind of learning loop, and one that gives us access to lots and lots more information and potential feedback. Fundamentally, I'm old enough to remember when we landed on the moon and we had computers for that. But the computers back then were less than 1/1000th of the power that we now have. The cost effectiveness has really changed. So even in the last 10 years, we have incredible amounts of new data and measurement that's possible. We've got drones to understand what's going on in parts of the world we couldn't reach before. We have light pole sensors that will give us not only visual information, but chemical information of what's in the air, sound information, where was the gun that fired that shot. Lots of ability to get feedback that we didn't before, and lots of ability to analyze that feedback, to use modeling and expertise to relate the feedback to the actions that caused it. We've got, for example, in the last decade again, pandemic tracking via search terms. If you wanted to know where SARS was headed a decade ago, you looked at hospital admissions. Today, you look at searches people are doing for symptoms related to the disease context, and we can tend to get 10 or 12 days ahead of where we were a decade ago in that kind of modeling. Police predictive modeling, another area for that. We not only analyze decisions, but we make them differently now. The engagement and the algorithms that are possible to allow people to look at information and make a decision differently. Remote medical advice, certainly in the military and throughout the country, is becoming increasingly important because we have a lot of people who need medical care that aren't near hospital rooms, and we can do that now in ways we couldn't. A big example that everybody's aware of is the fact that a decade ago, people said computers will never drive cars in complex urban settings on their own, but that was wrong. When you add all of those up in terms of more information, analysis, and ways to decide about it, we are really changing the scale and the degree of specialization in the way we organize work. We've, of course, done that for thousands upon thousands of years. Instead of being groups of 30 people, we're now metropolitan areas of multiple millions. Recent examples, the education via MOOCs. I taught at Harvard for 28 years. Some collaboration now with MIT allows the basic programming course that was MIT's most popular course and one of their biggest. It held about 225 to 250 students a year, but it was offered via MOOCs recently to as many as 150,000 people around the globe. And surprisingly, that hard work course kept people engaged. Equally surprisingly, the best scorer recently was a 17-year-old from Mongolia. We've got lots of problems where reaching people and organizing at a distance from a larger group with things like elderly home care, can we keep them going? That will be very important. So what we're trying to do now is to understand whether, and let me see if this goes forward here, we can use these digital tools to continue to properly offer specialization and scale. When we do it well, we get more productive work that creates win-win for everybody. But there's a lot of worry that we can invest in collaboration to create larger communities sharing the same systems and work processes, and it won't work. Or it won't be shared in a way so that there will be losers as well as winners. So that many of the smaller jurisdictions in particular worry about losing control and losing out. So we want to look now at Ohio, we'll look at Michigan, we'll look at Oakland County, Michigan, but fundamentally we sort of split this out so that the Ohio story with Stu can talk to state and local collaboration, and everybody's going to basically talk to the four issues of what have you done, what are the impacts and evidence for the results, have you gotten the business case you were hoping for, who else could do the kind of things that this jurisdiction, in this case for Stu will be Ohio, and beyond that, Ohio has done some very specific things at the leading edge of state and local collaboration. Are there other ideas that perhaps haven't been explored as intensively that should come up the priority curve now? So let me turn it over a bit to Stu. Stu, on those questions, what has Ohio been doing and what should others be aware of?
Sure. Appreciate the opportunity to talk. Thanks, Jerry. So here in Ohio, we do have a long history of working with local government. It really kind of started at our interaction with the counties on spatial initiatives, probably as early as 1988, but really started to ramp up in the late 90s. The Ohio Geographically Referenced Information Program, or OGRIP, really kind of serves as that state coordinating body for GIS that has local government participation as well as the private sector and higher ed. And in doing so, it really allowed us an opportunity, at least a platform, to begin those conversations on where we could work more collaboratively in those different governing areas. And one of the first big ones that we did was really the location-based response system, which is really a driven center line with validated site-specific address for each county. And then that data was made available by county to the state. And the state then got significant involvement from DOT and provided the LBRS standards, our Department of Transportation. And we assisted in the funding of about 35 to 45% of those efforts to ensure that they were following that standard. That was part of the process. And I think right now we have 85 of the 88 counties that are participating in that program and providing annual updates to that center line, which has significant impacts back on next generation 911 in particular, as well as emergency response and so forth and so on. We also started a statewide imagery program, I think it was back in 2006, where we had our contract in place for a 1-foot pixel resolution for the entire state, but we provided an opportunity for local government to pay the difference between that 1-foot pixel resolution to a 6-inch or a 4-inch, and all they had to do was pay that uplift, which gave us significant dividends in getting the state covered at a high resolution on the imagery side. More recently, we've done a lot with co-location and getting some significant interest from higher education and local government. Probably from a local government standpoint, the biggest tipping point was Cuyahoga County, which is Cleveland, moved their entire production environment to the state's primary data center in Columbus. That ongoing relationship with Cuyahoga County really grew to them moving their mainframe application and getting off of their mainframe and the costs associated with that to the state's mainframe for additional savings. And that's really that whole discussion with higher ed from the Ohio State University is in our data center now, as is Bowling Green State University, University of Cincinnati, Cuyahoga County. We're getting a lot of interest from other counties in the state to move their production environments or look at the state data center as a DR site for local government. We also currently host Morgan County.
Let me insert one question here, Stu, with my budget director hat on. If I'm understanding the OGRIP story and the data, plus the shared sort of data center operations work, in all of those cases, it sounds like if a larger community is willing to do it the same way, in this case use your approaches, then the transaction cost or the unit cost can drop. And that actually was the promise in Ohio, but it's been achieved in Ohio partly because the federal government was willing to put up some of the money to make it happen. Is that roughly right?
It depends on the program and the project, but certainly from the spatial side, with OGRIP in particular and our interaction with local government, we told them we would not impose any kind of standards on local government and their GIS development unless the state was willing to step forward and provide funding in that fashion. So with the location-based response system, there was federal dollars that were used from, I think, DOT's access to those, but also state dollars went in to build that out.
Okay.
So just a couple quick others, and you know, actually I'll move on very quickly, I promise, Jerry. You know how difficult it is for me to stay within my 8-minute limit. But if we talk about the co-location services, Cuyahoga County saved approximately $12 million that they had set aside for building a data center. OSU was going to build a data center. It was about $40 million. The University of Cincinnati moved in and did DR up there where they were going to build another data center. Just $60 million in cost avoidance, if you will. And then the other piece that I think a lot of states do is we have a long history of putting IT contracts and pricing that local government can leverage. Probably the most significant one that comes to mind is we worked with the Ohio State University to obtain educational pricing on VMware licenses and products, and really made VMware the de facto standard for virtualization in Ohio. And I think probably the last numbers I saw was how that contract is being leveraged by state, local government, higher ed, and K through 12. It's about $22 million worth of savings over what they would have paid if that contract wasn't in place. So a lot of things there. And if I talk a little bit about those impacts, I think the contractual process that we have, whenever we do an enterprise contract from a state perspective, we're always looking at trying to get local government to be aware of it and then know that they can leverage it and even negotiate a better price if that's the best way to go. But those are the kind of things that we want to have in place. So, you know, the next, I guess I skipped over the impacts. I mean, I just talked a little bit about the $60 million in cost avoidance. But if you think about what other states could do, I mean, I think that the cat is, I am kind of glad to say, out of the bag. You saw that from the map on from NASCIO. There's 17, 18 states that are, you know, previously on that map anyways, that are doing things. I know Utah and other states are pursuing the co-location angle. The one thing that I would say, if states are just getting started, that they need to interact with their GIS coordinator or their GIO in their state, because that's an untapped resource for many CIOs for interacting with local government. They work at all levels of local government and they maintain solid relationships. It's a great thing to do. And we talk about some of the key targets. I think IT is ripe for that interaction with local government. I think we could do a significant amount more. I think the biggest challenge, and that's why I go back to the GIOs or the GIS coordinators in the state, the biggest challenge is knowing who to communicate with from the local government perspective to find the person in state government and for state government to hook up with the right people at local government. I think those things in themselves have to be sort of worked through to really make these things work.
If we're going to work through, and this is my last question and just your sense of it, and we're talking about state and local collaboration, there's a certain amount going on now. And 5 years from now, there will be another amount, probably a larger amount. But will that be a 10% growth, or will that be a doubling or a tripling of growth? How rapid and how big is this target for state-local collaboration?
From my perspective, I think, you know, here in Ohio in particular, we work with the Ohio County City Information Technology Association, which has opened that relationship door. And I think once that door is open, I think the sky is really the limit. I think that there's a lot of value on both sides from an economy of scale standpoint, but also from the state perspective to leverage the buying power of the counties, the 88 counties, in conjunction with the state's buying power, just puts us in a much better position. I would say certainly a 20 to 35% increase in how we do things. I think the same things that we're seeing at the state are happening at the county level, where they're looking for consolidation, they're looking for optimization, and I think that the state can assist and support those kind of activities.
Super, thanks, Stu. Let's go a bit to a different story, up to Michigan and Linda, and a state with another state collaboration. Can you tell us that story, Linda?
Yes. Hi, this is Linda Pung in the state of Michigan. And I want to share some information on state-to-state collaboration that we are very proud of in the state of Michigan, and have had a great partnership with the state of Illinois. In Michigan, we have implemented a Medicaid cloud solution, which is basically taking Michigan's enterprise Medicaid management information system and moving it over to cloud technology. The system is based on a modular architecture, so that we're now able to offer to other states Michigan's Medicaid solution, you know, in modular components. Today, the state of Illinois is currently using Michigan's solution for electronic Medicaid incentive payments. This allows Illinois healthcare providers to use Michigan's system, and their healthcare providers can apply for the federal Medicaid incentive payments based on their use of electronic medical records. The state of Illinois is also using Michigan's module for Medicaid healthcare provider management. Today, this allows healthcare providers in the state of Illinois to apply for and be approved to be involved in the Medicaid healthcare payment plans in the state of Illinois, and it basically takes them through the whole credentialing process to be approved and enrolled for that purpose. We're currently working on migrating the rest of the Michigan Medicaid modules to the cloud. That'll be completed this year, and we're continuing to work on Illinois full implementation of the Medicaid module. So it's a very significant state-to-state collaboration. Let me share a little bit of information about the impacts around this and the significance. Michigan and Illinois Medicaid programs combined are significant. The Medicaid payments annually are greater than $30 billion for these two states. And wow. Michigan and Illinois represent 9% of the U.S. Medicaid population. So the amount of citizens that are being served through this state-to-state collaboration is also very significant. In terms of savings, I'm just going to share a few numbers. For the implementation of the two modules, the electronic Medicaid incentive payments and the provider management, working together with Illinois on the business case and return on investment, you know, we're estimating Illinois saving $10 million. And for the full, if Illinois, as we complete implementation of Illinois using the full Medicaid management system, there's potential of savings estimated up to $160 million for Illinois.
Do you have a percentage on that?
Pardon?
Is that
percentage
expressible at, yeah, it's a percentage.
Sure. So in looking at, I'll talk about it, perhaps it might mean more in terms of a federal percentage. So these Medicaid systems are extremely complex and can run anywhere, in the amount of, 300 to 600 million for implementation. So when we look at the federal level, because Michigan and Illinois are receiving 90% federal matching funds to implement this collaborative solution, we're looking at the federal level, an estimated savings of 60%. So we are talking about a couple $100 million, being saved at the federal level. And additionally, we're talking about, close to 200 million being saved at the Illinois level. So you're talking, 50 to 60% savings of cost compared to a traditional custom implementation that's just for one state. Additionally, states will continue to save on the cost of operations of these very large, complex systems that run, can run, $100 million to support per year, and future federal enhancements that will need to be implemented. So one of the big lessons learned that we have working together on this particular collaboration is that you do want to work up front and have a very thorough business case planned out in looking at what is your governance model going to look like across these two states, how are decisions going to be made, how are priorities going to be set, but even more important is what really is the financial model that you're looking at, what is the expected return on investment. So you really do need to roll up your sleeves and get into the numbers and look at all the costs, the implementation costs, the ongoing support costs, what would be the cost of future federal enhancements, and then look at the business model from each sponsor's perspective. We looked at it from Michigan's perspective. We looked at it from the federal perspective, working with our federal partners in the Center for Medicaid Services. And then we also looked at it from Illinois' perspective, looking at it, working on it with folks from Illinois, looking at what does that financial model mean for the state of Illinois and those estimated savings. So
were you able to look at it? Were you able to look at it from the provider perspective as well?
Looking at it from the provider perspective, from the healthcare provider perspective, we looked at it more in terms of what are the benefits to healthcare providers and also to citizens if a state can get off some of their legacy technology and get, have access to new technology where they can, potentially have a quicker, a higher service level, a quicker turnaround time frame to get approved, Medicaid payments going quicker out the door, moving away from paper, into automated solutions, moving to mobile technology. So we looked at it from those perspectives in terms of the service benefits to the end customer, the end citizen, and also the healthcare provider.
Okay. Same kind of concluding questions as with Stu's, the degree to which the Michigan approach could go to other places, and are there targets other than Medicaid that look like they would yield to better state-to-state collaboration?
Sure. Let me talk a little bit about other states that should consider, talking with Michigan. Let's talk first about the Medicaid collaboration, or really any state-to-state or other, cross-jurisdictional collaboration. And I'm going to talk about some of our lessons learned that drive, my recommendations here. I know that Michigan, based on our lessons learned, and when I talk about the Medicaid cloud, we are really going to look for other states who have strong executive support and are willing to partner in a strong governance model. And the reason we say that is because this is not easy. We're paving new ground, we're changing culture, and we're looking at, new business models for both partnering states. And so that means you must have strong executive support to get through decision making, to work through tough issues, to change culture. What we're also looking at Michigan's Medicaid cloud has received full federal certification, so we know that it meets federal mandated requirements for Medicaid. And in order to really achieve cost savings, we're looking for other states who are willing to adopt Michigan common business processes that have been federally certified, so that we can move forward quicker with implementation, but also keep the cost down. So when you're looking at, cross-jurisdictional success, to be able to really be able to collaborate and get costs down, you need to be able to adopt common business processes so that you can share common technology solutions and stay away from customization. That also requires strong executive support because you're looking at change management when you're talking about changing business processes, to adopt a common business process. So in looking at areas outside of Medicaid, we know that there's also great opportunity in other human services related programs, and we believe that because when you're working on programs that have a large amount of federal funding, we know that there's a strong business case at the federal level as well as the state level for the cross collaboration. And so we found that part of our success was due to having sponsors directly at the federal level working with the two states, helping us work through these business challenges and arriving at a common governance model to be successful. So we feel like we can potentially look at replicating this approach in other human services, business parts of the business programs, maybe around eligibility for human services programs, maybe around child support, maybe around child welfare, all areas that have a strong sponsorship at the federal level as well. We also, the health information exchange is another area where there could be more state-to-state collaboration or leveraging of technology solutions that have been implemented. That many of the states are paving ground related to health information exchange, and some of our technology solutions really can be shared and adopted. So that's an opportunity for Michigan because we're implementing our health information exchange technology in a modular way as are other states, and those modular components, could be shared with other states.
Got the picture.
So we're also, there's opportunity in terms of looking at technology, sharing data, but also looking at technology for data analytics because we know that citizens cross those state boundaries and cross jurisdictional boundaries. And then there's opportunity, as Stu talked about, for sharing just data center hosting. I think in Michigan at the state level, as we look at other opportunities we might pursue, we'll probably look at some of the technology solutions that we have already adopted at an enterprise level at the state of Michigan that we have 18 state departments in the state of Michigan using, such as identity management solution, which is a secured way that citizens can access systems, for a state. Looking at electronic document management, some of these common technology services where we've already been successful, sharing them across the whole state of Michigan at the state government level.
So there's large targets and an ability to not only think about sharing within Michigan, but with other states. Let me pull it down next, Phil, to you in Oakland County, where the stories are very similar, it seems to me, but focus much more on local collaboration. What's the Oakland story?
Thanks, Jerry. And my story, and I appreciate being part of this because our story is about how large governments can help small governments. There's a reason why smaller governments don't use big technologies. One, they can't afford the capital expense, and two, they can't afford the ongoing operating. And what we in larger government need to understand is that we need to help them. Okay, that's part of our responsibility. So Oakland County is 910 square miles just north of Detroit. There's 1.2 million people, and 62 cities, villages, and townships that are incorporated therein. And we've been sharing technologies with these folks for over 40 years, and it started with law enforcement and tax and assessment. But as the advent of the cloud and some of the other abilities to share technologies in a more streamlined way, we started looking at new initiatives. So we actually had a wonderful opportunity to talk at the Digital Communities effort with the Center for Digital Government. And I brought forth a new idea we had about us providing those technologies for the smaller governments, providing them in an easy way to ease of access, and then getting a win-win-win situation. Well, the first meeting was a little deflating. I mean, there were CIOs in the room that told me I was crazy, and we had to persevere, and we had to keep moving forward. And then the next couple of years, as the cloud became more prevalent and there was more interest in the topic, people became way more interested in what we were doing. So we were able to launch two initiatives, the first being our G2G Cloud Solutions, which provides e-commerce technologies to governments of all sizes. So to give you a quick example, we had a small government here in Oakland County that it's a really small village. The provider dropped them. There wasn't enough revenue coming in. There wasn't enough for them to have a strong business case. So they said, okay, in a month you're done. And we were able to jump in, use our platforms, and provide the smaller governments the same technology that larger governments were using, because we were able to have revenue coming in and the revenue stream coming in that would support all levels without us just simply turning them off because they didn't have enough volume. So as we move forward, we have over 61 communities now, some internal, but many outside Oakland County now, really all over the state of Michigan, using this technology because we provide it for them. We set it up at no cost, and then we use the enhanced access fees that are generated from the Enhanced Access to Public Records Act here in Michigan. We use those fees to go ahead and pay all of our costs. And there's a revenue stream that comes in on an annual basis. We're looking towards maybe about $1.5 million of revenue that's coming in that will then support the system and all the ongoing costs for those smaller governments. But the next evolutionary step was our G2G marketplace. We knew that e-commerce technologies, while that's great and we could provide that, we looked at the opportunity to go ahead and create a marketplace where we could have contracts that had been RFP'd, contracts negotiated, terms vetted, terms and conditions vetted, and that people could buy off of those contracts. And it sounds very similar to a lot of collaborative purchasing areas or identities that are out there. But what we also wanted to do was create an area where we could provide best practices, and we could provide a marketplace that not only did the competitive and collaborative procurement, but also provided best practices, blogs, and services that could go along with the procurements. We've had significant success with that. We've had over 560 registered users from all over the country come into the marketplace. They get free assessments on cybersecurity and GIS, and then they can also then use those contracts, and we've had a number of our contracts be used by local governments around the country. And what does that do for us? It lowers our cost. It lowers our per unit cost for what we need to consume, at the same time lowering it for the smaller government. That's where the win-win-win came in. We have a win for small governments because they can use big technologies. We have a win for Oakland County because it lowers our costs, in essence saving us money. And then the win for the larger company or the larger technology that wouldn't be able to open up that marketplace. They're not able to build those relationships that can then turn into sales. So we've been able to do that with these two projects. And so that's what's been done. The impacts and evidence on the agenda, we're getting a revenue stream, so the G2G Cloud Solutions, which is at www.g2gcloud.com, that service is fully funded through the revenue stream. There's no need to use taxpayer dollars any longer. We needed to start it up, but now it's being paid back and our investments paid back, and then we're taking care of ongoing support. And the customer base is growing, so that means there are small governments that out there that need this service. On the G2G marketplace, as I said, we've had people register from all over the country. They're downloading the best practice documents. They're finding policies out there, whether it be social media, cybersecurity, business continuity recovery. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I always use this analogy in cybersecurity. I'll use it here as well. when you're at the campfire with all your friends and the bear runs into the campfire and you all run away, the question is, do I have to be faster than the bear? And the answer is no, I have to be faster than the slowest person in the group. Well, if we can get people in the smaller governments to speed up, if we can get them to get farther along, then in whether it be in cybersecurity or whether it be in their ability to provide technologies, they won't be the slowest person in the group.
Sure.
You look at it.
Let me interject just
Sure.
a little bit here and see, in order to save some time, more time for our group, if we can draw the Oakland County lessons and next step kind of targets together in the next minute or so.
Sure, you bet. So from when you look at who can, and that's where I was headed, thanks Jerry, is who can apply this lesson, really any government of any size that has the wherewithal to provide a shared solution or a shared contract or a shared technology can do this. I believe that there are a number of states. We work very closely with Dave Behan and the CIO at the state of Michigan. We work very closely with the state trying to make sure there's contracts, and they actually partnered with us in the G2G marketplace to put contracts in there. But as far as other collaborative efforts, and what I could say is, there's something that's sitting on the horizon that we need to look at as smaller government or mid-sized government or even state government, is many of us are providing and trying to do disaster recovery services, and we're purchasing from a large company that might be in another state. Well, if I can find a regional effort where I can have smaller governments or even mid-sized governments that are maybe 40, 50 miles away from me, maybe then I could do some sort of regional collaborative, and then we could all save money. And that's what this is about. Local budgets are strapped. We do not have the money. We aren't seeing the revenue stream coming back for 10, 15 more years to where we were in 2007. So we need to make sure we can do what we can. So there's opportunities out there, and there's many large governments that have the wherewithal. It's do they have the vision and the innovation pieces they need to go ahead and provide it to the smaller ones.
Mm-hmm. Super. That gives us actually 3 interesting stories about what has actually been going on at the leading edge of this cross-jurisdictional collaboration. We've got about 10 minutes for Q&A from the group, and there's been a number of questions that came in. One that I noted right from the beginning, the questions, as you might expect, focus on the flip side of our stories. Our stories largely told the good news. The questions are, but what was the bad news or the potential bad news? And there's a question for Stu that said, how supportive is the service provider community to cross-jurisdictional collaboration? Won't that sort of reduce the market opportunities for vendors? What do you think, Stu?
Well, I don't think so. It depends on really the approach. We have a hosted cloud voice over IP provider for the state. That contract is leveraged by numerous counties and numerous state initiatives as well. So I think there are opportunities for that. This isn't about necessarily the state providing all those services. It's providing the conduit to get the services that the local government folks need.
Mm-hmm. Phil and Linda as well, did you have any pushback from the private vendor side on this as suggesting that the government was going to reduce their business opportunities rather than expand them?
Well, in our perspective here at Oakland County, since we're trying to provide larger technologies to smaller governments, there was many of these vendors that didn't even want to play in that space. They didn't want to invest the time or the money to go out and talk to 3 townships that might be in the middle of rural Michigan. So we were able to do that on their behalf and then create the marketplace. So they've been pretty happy with our marketplace, and we're working very closely with them.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is
Okay.
Linda. For the Michigan and Illinois collaboration on the Medicaid solution, we did have some challenges in Michigan in that area, and one of the challenges that we had was, Michigan is hosting, the cloud solution and providing the service, in this case, to the state of Illinois. So Michigan owns the licenses, the software license, that we're implementing for the cloud. We are doing the purchase of that software, and we're working with multiple vendor partners. Some of the vendor partners wanted to charge Michigan a separate cost for the Michigan licenses versus the Illinois licenses, and we really just wanted to pay for the licenses for the capacity of the 2 combined states. So we had to take some of those software negotiations up to the highest executive levels in the state of Michigan and also in some of the, vendor partner companies to be able to get the licensing agreements that we were really looking for. We've also had some challenges in terms of, I think, some vendor partners, lobbying, in one state or the other, pushing, for an agenda that would, perhaps slow us down, so that we wouldn't have this collaboration, because it does reduce their ability to market business separately to each state. But again, we've had strong executive support, so because of that, we've been able to have the conversations at the right executive level and move forward.
So Jerry, part of that question was, the appropriate role for government. And I will have to say it was difficult at times to get our commission that was only worried about our 910 square miles and 62 communities to allow us to branch outside of Oakland County. So there is a great deal of convincing that has to take place to say, why are you doing it for them when you should be doing it for us?
Do you feel that the arguments you made in Oakland will be applicable elsewhere, or will there be some places that simply this won't fly?
No, I do believe it's applicable. I think this is something where we have to look at the greater good sometimes, and by providing it to them, and as long as I can have the revenue stream to sustain the model, and I'm not using the taxpayer dollars from Oakland to subsidize someone on the other side of the state, they have no problem with it, and they've been very supportive.
A number of questions that have come in and focus around the fact that almost all these projects have a procurement sitting there someplace. And in fact, Phil, you're providing procurement services. Linda, you're providing procurement services. Stu, you're providing procurement services. Some of the questions were, do the private support that, or do they see that as unfair competition? And I can see it both ways. But I'm also aware that NASCIO for years has worked on collaborative procurements, and that was the Western States effort that's now called Value Point. That sounds to me to be offering somewhat similar things. Are there now just growing ripeness of this collaborative procurement idea that we should all be aware of, or is there some competition and difference between these various sources of state-to-state collaboration or jurisdiction-to-jurisdiction collaboration to gain purchasing power through these procurements by standardizing what's procured?
So from our perspective in Oakland, it's not a competition. Matter of fact, we even support the other entities and link to them from our marketplace because we believe everybody should look at the best deal they can get. The difference here is that we're also offering the advice. We're consulting with them. With putting the solution in is one thing. Using it to change your business process is another, and that's another role that government can play in this process.
I'm pretty familiar or pretty aware that Value Point does do a lot of the collaborative definition of what the specifications in the procurement ought to include. I'm not so sure there's that kind of consultative help on the implementation and business change side of the efforts, but maybe we can, do any of you know about that? I'm quite interested in the growth of collaboration, and then quite interested if there's multiple centers that are exploring this. How will they support each other, and or might there be bumping together that we'll have to work through? The Value Point stuff, is it very similar to what we're doing here, and do they do the downstream implementation support that you're describing, Phil?
That I do not know, Jerry.
Okay. Another question that came up on this was the degree to which we are talking about the collaboration on a cross-boundary basis being the government to government. Is there an important element that we need to talk about more clearly, which is the government with the private sector folks that are often the producers and providers of these of the technologies we're dealing with here? What's the private role here that we see?
Well,
how to work?
this is Stu. I kind of alluded to it earlier. I mean, I think when we put our procurement documents out and we are talking about local government in that same procurement, and the people that are responding understand that there will be a local government component of it, they have to win that business, and that's part of that whole process. So it's the competition, it's the price point, it's the economy of scale that it brings, and knowing that ahead of time is much simpler.
Mm-hmm. Given
Jerry,
they
play a very...
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Linda.
I think it's true from Michigan's perspective, as well as we look at this, is even where we've done procurements that's been shared with another state, it has to be competitively bid that way. So up front, when we do procurement, we need to include, that describe exactly what the procurement is for and how we intend to be able to, share that procured solution or share the purchasing power through the contract, with other entities. And as long as it's competitively bid that way, it's very appropriate to do so.
Super.
But Jerry,
given that our time is tight now, and we've got about 6 or 7 more minutes, maybe we can run over just a teeny bit, but I wanted to draw some conclusions. But initially on this, I wanted to give each of the panel members just some idea. We've had a very big subject and a very limited amount of time to talk about it. Some things have come on the table, but as you part this conversation, what are the sort of parting thoughts that each of our jurisdictions has here? Let me keep it in the same order we had. Stu, let me turn to you for parting thoughts on collaboration.
Especially, I'll speak just really to my experiences here in the state of Ohio, of course, with local government. I mean, the state needs to be very upfront. They need to be realistic in the dates that they put out there, and you have to build that trust with local government. That is the key to the collaboration, is that trust is there, and that takes time, and that takes, meeting your commitments from a state perspective. And sometimes we have a lot of masters at the state, and it takes us a little bit longer to get things done. So you have to be setting realistic expectations with local government on what you can do, what you can provide. But I think this all goes back to relationships, it goes back to trust, and it goes back to collaboration. And communication equals coordination, which then grows into collaboration.
And it will all take time. Linda, your parting thoughts.
I think we really need to, work with, we want everyone to look at, what can you offer from your state, or what are you willing to at least have a conversation about pursuing, with another state. And looking at from Michigan's perspective, with the Medicaid cloud, we would really like to talk with other states that are obviously interested at some, even if it's not in the next 2 years, it might be in the next 5 years, looking at Michigan's Medicaid cloud solution. But also if there are other states that are looking at offering some type of service, we're very willing to talk with another state or cross-jurisdictional entity about the lessons that we've learned in Michigan, what worked well, what didn't work well, how did we approach this, even just for planning purposes. So we really would like to have some follow-up on that.
Super. Turn the ideas into action now that more people are thinking seriously about it. Phil, your parting thoughts. Hello? Am I there?
I'm here. Sorry, Jerry.
Okay.
You don't let innovation take a backseat to uncertainty and doubt first. There's people that'll tell you it can't be done. There's people that are going to tell you that it's not possible. You got to keep pushing forward because this stuff is hard. Next, all governments
Here. Well said.
Yeah. All governments are not created equal when it comes to sharing. Not everybody's ready to share. So don't go and don't try to push people into something they can't do. Work with the ones that are ready, and then the others will come along when they watch their neighbors and their friends do better at it. And then last, just remember it's all about the people. we keep throwing technologies at our organizations to try to make things happen. And it's not just the technology that changes the world. It's the ability to change the process and the ability for the people to actually make the services happen. So don't forget those things, and you'll do fine.
Thank you, folks, very much. We had a lot of questions from the participants in the webinar that we obviously did not have full time to get back to. Those that we can, we'll try to get some answers afterwards. We will make this presentation available afterwards. And we had some thoughts about conclusions even coming into this that let me run through quickly as we end up in the last few minutes. One is that this idea of collaboration is a fundamental governance idea that's been around for all sorts of things, not just the U.S. government and technology sharing. But Benjamin Franklin noted that in certain kind of conflicts, we must all hang together, or most assuredly, we shall all hang separately. There are certain challenges here that we can't meet nearly as well, and maybe not at all, unless we're better at collaboration. And in the collaboration that's important for this group and this webinar and this follow-up, we want to try to say, are you thinking about what you're going to do and what action you can take this month, this year, soon? We had some thoughts. In terms of priorities, the one is just pay attention to this issue. 60% of you said it was getting attention, but I think there's a lot of places back home and with other partners that it's not getting attention. So learning about the cross-jurisdictional opportunities from top-performing individuals, institutions, and communities of practice, this kind of webinar represents one thing there, but there's a lot of search between, not just the NASCIO community, but the NASPO community, the National League of Cities, the National Governors Association, the variety of groups that come together are all looking to standardization and scale economies. But not all of them are looking to achieve those by collaboration beyond their borders. And so this is one thing to do. This is pay attention to this issue. And then work not just to say who might do it, but as Phil was mentioning, who is positioned to really have an interest and an ability to take the early actions. It will not be everybody, but you don't need everybody at first. This is a slow assembly of increased commitment that can then take off and be much faster as it now seems to be. Some of the faster and easier will be pretty much oriented on the technology community that can invest in information technology at larger scale. And we've had some examples in the cases we have here. Data center management, like Ohio is doing. The data modeling that allows for better sharing, as the National Information Exchange model has done in public safety arenas and others for a number of years. Online payment systems, that was a biggie for the groups that collaborated with Oakland County. Cybersecurity that has emerged as a critical element is clearly an arena where technology sharing is very critical. And the Internet of Things and the smart city examples around there are very often multi-jurisdictional collaborations to take advantage of economies of scale. But we've also had stuff that's even bigger numbers than that. The number 3 here on IT at larger scale is still targeted at the 5% that we talked about earlier. The 95% tends to be IT-enabled services at a larger scale. Geographic information services and how they provide guidance to other governmental services. Elderly support in healthcare. The Michigan and Illinois story about Medicaid is one example of a huge arena of expenditure where technology-based savings are possible, but the big possibility is really, do we change how we deliver the care? Does the information allow us to identify top priorities that way? Lifelong education, metropolitan-wide CRM applications, as the Boston area is now working on, county-wide stuff. And procurement, we mentioned here today the work of NASPO and their value point efforts. All of these are activities to think about the problem first, as in number 1, just is it a problem? Number 2, who's willing to work with you on the problem? Number 3, can you do the technology stuff that may be easiest and most contained? But then number 4, can we get out to really change the way government works in this fashion? If so, what will you be doing this month, this year? We will try to assemble the results of this webinar, disseminate them. We are interested in following up with the research here. And for those of you who are interested, when this presentation gets disseminated, there are links to some follow-up research, some additional concrete examples, some additional ideas of concrete things that can be done that have been assembled by Andres Ozels, and the studies and the stories that were mentioned by Eric earlier are at the NASCIO site. So we'd like to thank everybody for your support for this. We would like to hear more about what you would be interested in following up. And that having been said, let me turn it back to you, Eric, for closing.
Very good. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you to all of our speakers. And this is the contact information for our speakers. I'll leave that slide up for a little bit. We will be distributing the deck, and we will try to address some of those questions that we didn't get to offline. So we'll put something together to go with the deck when we distribute it to participants. And we want you to stay in touch with NASCIO going forward into 2017. We will have more webinars on a variety of topics. Take a look at our top 10 priorities that we published for 2017. We will be directly lined up with those priorities as we go forward. So with that, again, thank you, speakers. Thank you, Jerry. And happy holidays to everyone who joined us today. Thank you so much.